Good afternoon, everybody. The second reading for this second Sunday of Lent comes from St. Paul's letter to the Romans. This is a letter that he wrote before he even visited them. And even though he wished to go visit them one day, he never imagined the kind of circumstances that would bring him to the city of Rome eventually. He never dreamed that his travels to them would include a shipwreck, that he would live in that city under house arrest for 2 years, and that he would even literally lose his head for Christ in that city. So when he said to them in that letter, "I wish to come to you, Romans," you almost want to say, "Careful what you wish for, Paul." Today's passage is from Romans 8, and this is what he says. Brothers and sisters, if God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his only son, but handed him over for us all, how will he not also give us everything else along with him? St. Paul basically is reminding the Romans of the Trinitarian reality that the Father handed over his Son for our salvation. The Father freely gave us his Son. So if he was willing to give us his Son, imagine how much more he will give us everything else along with him. So we got it all, because if we got Jesus, we got indeed all. Now I want you to memorize the names of 3 mounts. Okay? Mount Tabor, Mount Moriah, and Mount Calvary. Okay? So Mount Tabor, Mount Moriah, and Mount Calvary. Can you repeat with me? Mount Tabor, Mount Moriah, and Mount Calvary. So the first one is Mount Tabor. It is the place of the transfiguration of Jesus that we hear of in the Gospel of today, which is Mark, where we see a glimpse of the reality to come, heaven. It's a little snapshot of heaven, a little window of what it will be. Jesus is radiant in glory, and he is speaking with Moses and Elijah nonetheless. Mount Tabor is in Galilee, is in the north. It's a beautiful area of the Holy Land. And the voice of the Father confirms it. "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." So that was Mount Tabor. Now, in order to go to Mount Moriah, we have to go back in time 2,000 years before Christ. So we gotta push rewind. So push rewind. Remember when you had to rewind the tape? So we're rewinding the tape 2,000 years before Christ to go back to Mount Moriah. And that's what eventually would become the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And Mount Moriah is the place where Abraham was ready to sacrifice his son Isaac. We know that in the end, Abraham did not need to sacrifice his beloved son as an offering to the Father, because God spared the life of Abraham's son. Now we gotta fast forward again to Jesus' time. So 2,000 years fast forward. So push fast forward. Bzz, bzz. Just like you used to do with your tapes, right? Your Betamax, remember that? The good old days. So fast forward 2,000 years back to the time of Christ. We go to Mount Calvary, which is less than 1 mile away from Mount Moriah. At Mount Calvary, the Father did not spare his only begotten Son. Unlike the son of Abraham that was spared from the sacrifice, God the Father this time accepted the sacrificial offering of his beloved Son, Jesus, for our salvation. So now that we looked at those three mounts, Mount Tabor, Mount Moriah, Mount Calvary, now we can understand today's passage of Romans 8, the second reading of today, with greater depth. For Paul said, "Brothers and sisters, if God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his only Son, but handed him over for us all, how will he not give us everything else along with him?" So we got it all, because if we got Jesus, indeed, we got it all. So thank you, St. Paul, for reminding us of the value of the sacrifice of Jesus for our salvation, and that in Jesus, the Father has already given us everything. Amen.